Daniel Cross stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, staring out at the Boston skyline without really seeing it. The city lights blurred together, just like they had every night for the past 3 years. His hand unconsciously moved to the framed photo on his desk. Jessica's smile frozen in time, her eyes bright with life that had been stolen far too soon. The intercom buzzed, shattering his thoughts. "Mr. Cross, there's someone here to see you. A young girl. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's about your wife." Daniel's throat tightened. "What did you say?" "She says she has information about Mrs. Cross. Should I send her away?" His heart pounded. Over the past 3 years, he'd chased countless leads, endured well-meaning but useless tips, and survived outright scams from people claiming to know something about Jessica's death. Each one had carved another piece from his already shattered heart, but he'd never been able to ignore even one. "Send her up." Daniel straightened his tie and tried to compose himself, but his hands trembled slightly. Through the glass walls of his office, he watched his assistant lead a small figure down the hallway. The girl couldn't have been more than 11 or 12, thin to the point of frailty, wearing clothes that had seen better days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her skin had that pale, translucent quality he'd come to recognize during Jessica's illness. The girl walked with careful, measured steps, like every movement cost her something. When she reached his office door, she met his gaze directly, and Daniel was struck by the intelligence and determination in those young eyes. "Mr. Cross?" Her voice was soft but steady. "My name is Maya. I need to talk to you about your wife, Jessica." Daniel gestured to the chair across from his desk, his throat too tight to speak immediately. The girl sat down, her small frame almost swallowed by the leather chair. "How do you know my wife's name?" Daniel finally managed. "How do you know anything about her?" Maya reached into her worn backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. She smoothed it carefully on the desk. It was a printout of a news article from 3 years ago, announcing Jessica Cross's death from an aggressive form of cancer. The girl's fingerprints had left small smudges across Jessica's photo. "I saw this in the hospital library," Maya said. "I recognized her face. Mrs. Cross was in my ward at St. Catherine's Charity Hospital. She was kind to me during her last weeks there." Daniel felt his chest constrict. St. Catherine's was where Jessica had enrolled in an experimental treatment trial when conventional therapy had failed. It had been their last hope, a cutting-edge drug that promised miraculous results. Instead, Jessica had died within 8 weeks of starting the treatment. "Why are you here?" Daniel asked, studying the girl's face. "What do you want?" Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back with a determination that seemed far too adult for her age. "Because Mrs. Cross didn't die from cancer, Mr. Cross. The medicine killed her, and it's killing me too." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Daniel's mind reeled. "What are you talking about?" "Jessica died from complications of her disease. The doctors said." "The doctors lied." Maya's voice cracked but didn't break. "Or they didn't know the truth. I'm not sure which, but I know what I've seen. I've been in that hospital for 2 years, Mr. Cross. I've watched 14 children die during the trial. All of them got worse after starting the medication, not better. And I've heard conversations the doctors didn't know I was listening to." Daniel stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His reflection stared back at him, hollow-eyed and haunted. Could this possibly be true? Or was this child confused, traumatized by her own illness and the deaths around her? "Maya, you're sick. You're probably on strong medications. Sometimes those can affect your perception." "I'm dying, Mr. Cross. I know that." Her voice was matter-of-fact, devastating in its simplicity. "The cancer is in my blood, and it's winning. But I'm not confused. Your wife talked to me before she got too sick. She told me about you, about your company, about how you met. She showed me pictures on her phone. That's how I found you." Daniel turned back to face her. "What else did Jessica tell you?" "She said you were the smartest man she knew, that you could solve any problem if you put your mind to it. And she said," Maya's voice wavered for the first time, "she said you loved her more than anything in the world. The tears Daniel had been holding back for 3 years finally broke through. He sank into his chair, his face in his hands. When he looked up, Maya was watching him with eyes far older than her years. "What do you need from me?" he asked quietly. "I need you to investigate, really investigate. Your wife deserved better than what happened to her, and there are other children in that hospital right now who are going to die if someone doesn't stop this." Daniel wiped his eyes, his mind already shifting into the analytical mode that had made him successful in business. "Tell me everything you know. Start from the beginning." Maya took a shaky breath and began to speak. "The experimental trial was called Project Genesis," she explained. "It was supposed to be a revolutionary treatment for aggressive cancers, particularly effective in cases where conventional therapies had failed. The drug was administered in a specialized wing of St. Catherine's Charity Hospital, far from the main patient areas. The trial specifically targeted patients with no family support or those whose families couldn't afford traditional treatment, people who had nowhere else to turn. Jessica had been recruited after her oncologist had exhausted all standard options. The trial promised hope, and Jessica had clung to that hope with everything she had. She'd been assigned to Ward 7B, where Maya now lived among 11 other children enrolled in the same program. "The first few days are always good," Maya said, her voice taking on a distant quality. "Patients feel stronger. The pain lessens. Lab results show improvement. Everyone thinks it's working. But then, around week 3 or 4, things change." "How?" Daniel asked, his pen flying across a legal pad. "People get sicker, but not from their original disease, from something new. High fevers, internal bleeding, organ failure. The doctors say it's just the cancer progressing, that the trial didn't work. Families are told their loved ones were too sick to be saved, but I've seen the pattern repeat too many times. It's always the same timeline, always the same symptoms. Daniel felt sick. What about the doctors? Surely they've noticed. Most of the regular staff don't work in 7B. There's a special team that handles the trial patients. Dr. Richard Caldwell is the lead researcher. He comes in twice a week to check vitals and take blood samples, but he doesn't really talk to us. There are 2 nurses, Mrs. Patterson and Mr. Lee, who manage day-to-day care. They're kind, but they follow Dr. Caldwell's orders without question. You said you overheard conversations. What did you hear?" Maya's hands twisted in her lap. 3 months ago, I couldn't sleep because of the pain. It was late, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I went to get water from the nurse's station, and I heard Dr. Caldwell on the phone in the medication room. The door was cracked open just a little. What did he say? He was arguing with someone. He kept saying things like, "The mortality rate is too high, and we need to adjust the dosage, and if anyone traces this back to us, we're finished." Then he said something that made me freeze. He said, "Victoria, I don't care how much money we're making. We're killing children." Daniel's pen stopped moving. "Victoria? Did he say a last name?" "No, but whoever she is, she's the one in charge." Dr. Caldwell was scared of her. I could hear it in his voice. "What happened after that?" "I ran back to my bed before he saw me, but I started paying more attention after that night. I noticed that Dr. Caldwell always brings the medication doses with him from outside the hospital. They come in unmarked vials, not in the regular pharmacy packaging, and I saw him falsifying records, once changing numbers in patient charts after Mrs. Patterson had already filled them out." Daniel's mind raced. If what Maya was saying was true, this wasn't just negligence or a failed trial. This was deliberate, criminal, murder. "Why didn't you tell someone? The hospital administration? The police?" Maya's laugh was bitter and heartbreaking. "I'm 11, Mr. Cross. I have no family. I'm a ward of the state living in a charity hospital. Who would believe me? And even if they did, what could I do? I can barely walk from my bed to the bathroom without getting exhausted." She was right. A sick child's testimony against a respected doctor would be dismissed as confusion or delusion. But Daniel Cross wasn't a sick child. He was a millionaire with resources, connections, and a burning need for answers about his wife's death. I need access to Jessica's medical records from the trial, Daniel said, his voice hard with determination, and I need to know more about this Dr. Caldwell and the mysterious Victoria. The records are kept in Dr. Caldwell's private office in the research wing. Everything's password protected and locked up tight. But I know someone who might be able to help. Maya pulled out another piece of paper, a phone number written in shaky handwriting. This is Alex Chen. He's a medical resident who used to work in 7B. He left the program suddenly about 6 months ago. I heard him arguing with Dr. Caldwell right before he left. I saved his number from a patient chart before they transferred me. Daniel took the paper, already reaching for his phone. Anything else? There's a meeting every Thursday night. Dr. Caldwell leaves the ward at exactly 8 p.m. and doesn't come back until after midnight. I don't know where he goes, but he always comes back with new medication vials. Daniel checked his calendar. Today was Tuesday. He had 2 days to prepare. Maya, where are you staying? I'm supposed to be at the hospital, but I snuck out to come here. I'll go back tonight. No. Daniel stood, his decision made. You're not going back there. It's not safe. Mr. Cross, if I disappear, Dr. Caldwell will know something's wrong. He might destroy evidence or move the operation. We need to be smart about this. Daniel hated that she was right. This brave, dying child had more strategic sense than most of his executives. Then we do this carefully, he said. You go back tonight, but from now on, you're going to call me every day. And if anything seems dangerous, you get out immediately. I'll have someone waiting outside the hospital ready to pull you out at a moment's notice. Maya nodded, relief flooding her face. For the first time, she looked her age, young, scared, but desperately hopeful. Do you really think we can stop them? She asked quietly. Daniel thought of Jessica, of her final days in that hospital, of the pain she'd endured, thinking the treatment might save her. He thought of the 14 children Maya had watched die, of the 11 still in danger. We're going to do more than stop them, he said. We're going to make them pay for every single life they've destroyed. The next 2 days passed in a blur of frantic activity. Daniel hired a private investigator to tail Dr. Caldwell and dig into his background. He called in favors from friends in law enforcement, carefully feeling out who might be sympathetic to a case against a major medical researcher, and he reached out to Alex Chen. The former resident agreed to meet at a coffee shop far from the hospital. When Daniel arrived, he found a young man in his late 20s, dark circles under his eyes and hands that shook slightly as he gripped his cup. Thank you for meeting me, Daniel said, sliding into the booth across from him. Alex didn't waste time on pleasantries. If you're here about Project Genesis, you're digging into something very dangerous. People who ask questions about that trial tend to have unfortunate accidents or sudden career setbacks. My wife died in that trial 3 years ago. A child contacted me with information suggesting it wasn't an accident. I need to know the truth. Alex's expression shifted from wary to pained. Jessica Cross. I remember her. She was one of my patients in the early days of the trial. I'm sorry for your loss. What can you tell me about the trial? Alex looked around nervously before leaning forward. I can't give you proof, they made sure of that when they forced me out. But I can tell you what I saw. Project Genesis isn't a legitimate medical trial. It's a money laundering operation disguised as research. Daniel's blood ran cold. Explain. The trial is funded by a shell corporation called Helix Innovations. On paper, they're investing in cutting-edge cancer research. In reality, they're processing money for other activities. The experimental drug being tested is essentially poison. It's designed to kill patients slowly enough that their deaths look like natural progression of their disease. Why? Daniel could barely force the word out. Because dead patients can't sue for malpractice. Dead patients can't report suspicious activities. And dead patients with no families don't generate investigations. The hospital gets paid enormous sums for each trial participant. Dr. Caldwell gets his cut. And Victoria Harlow, she's the real power behind Helix Innovations. She gets to move her dirty money through a seemingly legitimate business operation. There it was. The name Maya had heard. Victoria Harlow. How does someone like that keep operating? Daniel asked. She's brilliant at covering her tracks. Helix Innovations has funded dozens of legitimate research projects as camouflage. They've donated millions to hospitals and cancer foundations. Victoria herself sits on the boards of several major medical charities. She's untouchable because she's made herself indispensable to the medical community. But you figured out what she was doing. Alex's hands clenched. I started noticing the pattern about 8 months into my residency in 7B. Every patient enrolled in the trial died within 3 months. The symptoms didn't match their original diagnoses. I tried to raise concerns with Dr. Caldwell, but he shut me down. When I persisted, I started receiving threats, subtle at first, then increasingly direct. Someone broke into my apartment and left a clear message: keep quiet or suffer consequences. Why didn't you go to the police? With what evidence? Everything is carefully documented to look legitimate. Patient files show standard treatment protocols. Lab results are falsified but expertly done. It would be my word against a respected researcher and a wealthy philanthropist. I would have been destroyed professionally and gained nothing. Daniel understood that calculation all too well. But you're talking to me now. Because I've had 3 years to live with the guilt of my silence. 3 years of knowing that people are still dying because I was too afraid to fight back. And because you have something I didn't have: resources, connections, and motivation that goes beyond self-preservation. I need evidence, Daniel said. Something concrete that proves what they're doing. Alex pulled a flash drive from his pocket. Before they kicked me out, I managed to download patient data from the hospital server. It's encrypted, and I never had the technical knowledge to break it. But you run a tech company. Maybe your people can crack it. Daniel took the drive like it was made of gold. What's on it? Patient outcomes data for the past 5 years. If someone compares the mortality rates in 7B to standard cancer mortality statistics, the pattern will be clear. It's circumstantial, but it's a start. I need more than statistics. I need direct proof of falsified records, fraudulent billing, something that ties Dr. Caldwell and Victoria Harlow directly to criminal activity. Alex hesitated, then said quietly, "Doctor, Caldwell keeps a second set of records, the real ones. They're in his office safe. I saw them once when he forgot to close it before I walked in. Detailed accounts of each patient, actual medication dosages versus reported dosages, financial transactions, everything. How do I get access to his office?" "You don't. It's in a restricted area of the research wing. You'd need security clearance and about a dozen valid excuses for being there." Daniel smiled grimly. "I'm a major hospital donor. I can get access to any part of that building if I make enough noise about writing a check." Over the next week, Daniel executed his plan with military precision. He arranged a hospital tour under the pretense of considering a substantial donation to expand the cancer research wing. He brought along his company's CFO and made sure everyone knew significant money was on the table. During the tour, Daniel made careful note of security cameras, keycard access points, and staff schedules. He befriended the hospital administrator, an earnest woman named Dr. Patricia Morrison, who seemed genuinely dedicated to patient care. Daniel suspected she had no idea what was happening in her own hospital. Meanwhile, his tech team worked around the clock to decrypt the files Alex had provided. What they found was damning. Mortality rates in Ward 7B were nearly 100%, compared to expected rates of 40–60% for similar patient populations. The timeline of deaths corresponded exactly with Maya's observations. Patients uniformly deteriorated around weeks 3 to 4 of treatment. But statistics weren't enough. Daniel needed the smoking gun. Thursday evening arrived. At 7:45 p.m., Daniel sat in his car across from Street Catherine's, watching the research wing entrance. At exactly 8 p.m., Dr. Richard Caldwell emerged, briefcase in hand. and drove away. Daniel had 2 hours. He'd spent the past week cultivating a relationship with the night security guard, Greg Williams, a retired Marine who appreciated Daniel's own veteran status. Tonight, Daniel arrived with coffee and donuts, just like he had the previous 3 nights. "Evening, Mr. Cross," Greg said warmly. "You're here late again." "Can't sleep without checking on a few things," Daniel said, which was true enough. "Mind if I take a walk through the research wing? I want to get a feel for the space before I commit to funding the expansion." Greg hesitated. "I'm really not supposed to let visitors in after hours, especially in restricted areas." Daniel pulled out an envelope. "I understand completely. Hospital policy is important. But I'm going to be donating several $1 million, and I'd really like to see where my money would be going. Think of it as due diligence." Inside the envelope was a check for $10,000 made out to the hospital's Veterans Support Fund. Greg's eyes widened. "I suppose a brief walk couldn't hurt," he said slowly. "But I need to escort you." "Of course." They walked through the quiet hallways, Daniel making appreciative noises about the facilities while his mind raced. He needed to separate from Greg somehow. As they passed the research wing's bathroom, Daniel suddenly clutched his stomach. "I'm sorry, Greg. I think those donuts might have been a bad idea. Could you give me a minute?" "Sure thing. I'll wait right here." Daniel ducked into the bathroom and immediately pulled out his phone, texting his private investigator. "Execute distraction. Now." 30 seconds later, a fire alarm began blaring in the East Wing, nowhere near the research area, but loud enough to demand attention. "Damn it," Greg muttered. "Mr. Cross, I need to check on that. Can you find your way back to the main entrance?" "Absolutely. Go." The moment Greg disappeared around the corner, Daniel sprinted to Dr. Caldwell's office. The door was locked, but Daniel had come prepared. His company specialized in security systems. He knew exactly how to bypass a standard electronic lock. Inside, the office was obsessively organized. Diplomas lined one wall. A massive desk dominated the space. And behind it, set into the wall, was a safe. Daniel had 15 minutes, maybe less, before Greg returned. He pulled out a portable, electromagnetic device his security team had borrowed from less legitimate sources. It wouldn't work on high-end safes, but this was a standard model. 5 agonizing minutes later, the safe clicked open. Inside were 3 ledgers, several USB drives, and a locked box. Daniel photographed every page of the ledgers with his phone, his hands trembling with rage as he read the meticulous records of murder. Each patient had an entry: name, age, initial diagnosis, enrollment date, medication protocol, and death date. But more damning were the notations in the margins. Subject responded poorly to adjusted dosage. Accelerated deterioration as expected. Financial transaction confirmed. The ledgers showed payments from Helix Innovations to Dr. Caldwell, $50,000 per patient enrolled, with bonuses for maintaining specific mortality timelines. There were also references to VC approval, Victoria Harlow, signing off on each new patient intake. The USB drives contained video files. Daniel didn't have time to watch them all, but he played one at random. It showed Dr. Caldwell in a different office, speaking to someone off-camera. "The Cross woman died this morning," Caldwell said. "That's subject 37 completed. Transaction can be processed." A woman's voice responded, cultured and cold. "Excellent. How many more subjects do you have in the pipeline?" 11 children currently enrolled. 4 new adults being screened. We should hit our quarterly target easily. Make sure their records are properly sanitized. The last thing we need is another Alex Chen situation. He's been contained, but we can't afford more loose ends. Daniel felt his vision blur with rage. They were discussing Jessica's death like it was a business transaction. He copied all the files onto his own encrypted drive and returned everything to the safe exactly as he'd found it. As he closed the safe and reset the lock, his phone buzzed. "Greg, fire alarm was false." Heading back to research wing, Daniel slipped out of the office and had just rounded the corner when he ran into Greg. "Everything okay?" the guard asked. All good. I think I'll head out now. Thank you for your patience. Daniel drove home with evidence that could destroy Dr. Caldwell and Victoria Harlow, but his mind was on Maya. She was still in that hospital, still in danger. He needed to move quickly. The next morning, Daniel called Maya's hospital line, but a nurse answered instead. I'm sorry, sir, but Maya can't come to the phone right now. She's having a difficult day. Daniel's heart stopped. What do you mean? Her condition has deteriorated significantly overnight. Dr. Caldwell has ordered increased medication to manage her symptoms. They were trying to kill her. Maya had become a liability, and they were eliminating the threat. Daniel didn't bother with pretense. He called 911 and reported a poisoning in progress at St. Catherine's Hospital, Ward 7B. Then he called every media contact he had, every law enforcement connection, every person who owed him a favor. Within an hour, police and paramedics descended on St. Catherine's. The hospital administrator, Dr. Morrison, was horrified to discover what had been happening in her own facility. She immediately ordered all medications in Ward 7B seized for testing and suspended Dr. Caldwell's hospital privileges. But Caldwell was already gone. He'd disappeared the moment he'd heard about the police presence, taking Victoria Harlow's contact information and running. The FBI got involved, tracking financial transactions between Helix Innovations and offshore accounts. What they uncovered was even worse than Daniel had imagined. Project Genesis was just one of several fraudulent trials being run across the country. Victoria Harlow had been operating this scheme for over a decade, using vulnerable patients as pawns in a massive money laundering operation. She'd made hundreds of millions of dollars while hundreds of people had died. The investigation took 3 months. In that time, Maya received real treatment at Boston's top children's hospital, paid for by Daniel's personal funds. The experimental therapy her doctors tried wasn't a magic cure. Her cancer was too advanced for that, but it bought her time. Quality time, surrounded by people who actually cared whether she lived or died. Daniel visited her every day. They played board games, watched movies, talked about everything and nothing. Maya told him about the dreams she'd had before getting sick. She'd wanted to be a veterinarian. She loved animals, especially dogs. Maybe when you're feeling better, we can get you a dog, Daniel said one afternoon. Maya's smile was bittersweet. Mr. Cross, you don't have to pretend. We both know I'm not going to get better. Daniel's throat tightened. I know, but that doesn't mean we can't still make plans. Hope isn't about denying reality. It's about choosing to find light even in dark places. Is that what your wife would have said? That's exactly what she would have said. Dr. Richard Caldwell was arrested trying to board a plane to the Cayman Islands. He immediately cooperated with authorities, providing detailed testimony against Victoria Harlow in exchange for a reduced sentence. Victoria herself was harder to catch. She had resources and connections that made her nearly untouchable. But Daniel Cross was relentless. He used every tool at his disposal, hired the best lawyers, and personally funded a task force dedicated to bringing her to justice. It took 6 months, but they finally cornered her in Switzerland, where she was arrested on an international warrant. The trials were sensational. Media coverage was constant. Families of victims came forward with their stories. The scope of the conspiracy stunned the nation. Over 200 people had died across 5 different fake medical trials, and Victoria Harlow had profited to the tune of over $400 million. In the end, she received multiple life sentences. Dr. Caldwell got 30 years. Several other doctors and administrators who'd turned a blind eye received lesser sentences. But for Daniel, justice wasn't enough. Jessica was still gone, and Maya lived for 11 more months after her cancer was diagnosed terminal. But they were good months. Daniel formally adopted her, making her Maya Cross. She moved into his home, where he'd converted an entire floor into a comfortable space adapted for her needs. He hired nurses, but he was the one who sat with her through difficult nights, who read her stories, who made sure she knew she was loved. Jessica's parents visited often, embracing Maya as the grandchild they'd never had. Daniel's friends and employees treated her like the miracle. She was a brave child who'd stood up against evil when she had every reason to simply give up. Maya taught Daniel how to play video games. She insisted on decorating for every holiday, even obscure ones she'd found online. She got her dog a gentle golden retriever named Sunshine, who never left her side. And she laughed. God, she laughed so much, filling Daniel's house with a joy it hadn't known since Jessica's death. On a quiet Tuesday evening in September, Maya's breathing became labored. Daniel called hospice, but he knew this was the end. He held her hand as machines beeped softly, and Sunshine lay with her head on Maya's lap. "I'm scared," Maya whispered. "I know, sweetheart, but you're not alone. You're never going to be alone. Will you tell people about us? About Mrs. Cross and all the others? Every day for the rest of my life." "Good." Her eyes drifted closed, then opened again. "Mr. Cross, Dad, thank you for believing me." Daniel's tears fell freely. "Thank you for being brave enough to come to my office that day. Thank you for giving me a chance to make things right. Thank you for being my daughter." Maya smiled, and for a moment, Daniel saw Jessica in that smile, the same fierce hope, the same unshakable belief in goodness, even when surrounded by darkness. "Tell Sunshine she's a good girl," Maya murmured. "She's the best girl. And Dad, it's okay to be happy again. Mrs. Cross would want that. I want that too." Those were the last words Maya spoke. She slipped away peacefully an hour later, with Daniel holding one hand and Sunshine's paw resting on the other. The funeral was attended by hundreds of families of victims who'd found justice because of Maya's courage, hospital staff who'd been inspired by her strength, and strangers who'd followed the case and felt they'd known her. Daniel established the Maya Cross Foundation, dedicated to advocating for vulnerable patients and funding legitimate cancer research. He sold his company and devoted himself full-time to the foundation's work, traveling the country to speak about medical ethics, patient rights, and the importance of listening to the powerless. Years later, standing at the annual gala for the foundation, Daniel looked out at the crowd of donors, survivors, and activists. On the wall behind him hung two portraits, Jessica and Maya, forever young, forever connected by their shared fight against an unjust system. Someone asked him once what had kept him going through the darkest times, through the loss of both his wife and his daughter. "They taught me that love doesn't end with death," Daniel said simply. "Jessica's love gave me the foundation to build a life. Maya's courage showed me how to use that life for something meaningful. Neither of them got the time they deserved, but the impact they made, that's eternal." He paused, looking up at their portraits. "Wings of belief," he continued quietly. "That's what Maya called it once. She said some people are given wings not to fly above suffering, but to lift others out of it. Jessica gave me those wings when she loved me. Maya taught me how to use them. And now it's my turn to make sure others can fly too." In the audience, among the hundreds of people whose lives had been saved because one brave child had spoken up, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The nightmare had ended, but the legacy that would live forever